Hello and welcome back to the Argyle General Counsel Chief Legal Officer Summit. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, John Arsnall, Chief Information Officer with Goulston and Storrs. We're excited to have John and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Innovation Through Automation, Applying Legal Tech to Pump Up Productivity. John, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning to everybody. We're going to start this session with brief introductions from our esteemed panelists. So we can start off with Aaron.
Sure. Thank you, John. My name is Aaron Wiggins. I'm the General Counsel for Williams Lee, which is a business services provider for financial services, professional services companies, as well as large law firms.
Thank you, Aaron. Jolene, over to you.
Good morning, everyone from the beautiful and gloomy Pacific Northwest. My name is Jolene Wall. I'm the former Deputy General Counsel for Recreational Equipment Inc., hopefully everybody's favorite outdoor retailer. I have spent the last 20 years in retail in all various different types of legal technology, some beta, some not so much. And I'm looking forward to the time together this morning. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you both. So we'll just jump right into the topic. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the biggest barriers to the implementation of AI and automation in legal departments. Why don't we start with you, Jolene?
No problem. So I think the first thing that comes to mind with any new type of process coming into legal department is buy-in. Lawyers are notoriously, and lawyer likes and support staff are notorious for liking to do things the way that we were taught, whether it was in law school or undergrad. And so at least from my experience, that has been thing number one, is getting buy-in, not just from peers in the department, but also folks outside the department who are going to have to engage with the AI or the automation as well.
Yeah, I think also kind of on that buy-in point, because our legal departments, I mean, they vary in size, but I doubt many of us have in our legal departments, we don't have technical resources. So you're going to be relying on your chief information officers or your technology officers to help you get that implemented. And they're going to have their own checks that they have to do and their own priorities. So making sure that they are on the team when you're trying to implement these new resources is going to be critical just to get them off the ground.
And I think that's something that's important too, is like buy-in is getting the budget for it. When you're working in-house, support staff, whether it's HR, whether it's the legal department, finance, we're generally the ones who are last on the list to get budget for new things because we're not, generally speaking, revenue growing departments. And so when you're talking about getting buy-in, making sure that the folks that are going to be getting the benefit of the technology or the AI see the value and they can advocate for you as well, because without budget, you're not going to get the tech.
Yeah, and I think on that budget too, on the implementation part, the one that kind of took me by surprise recently and has in the past too is the cost of implementation. You know, a lot of these providers will give you the yearly subscription cost, and you can put that into the budget. But just be aware that especially for the SaaS solutions, the implementation cost can also be double what the yearly subscription cost is, or it can be a significant amount of money. So when you are building that budget out, it's better to, on the front end, recognize that there is going to be that huge commitment up front. I think that's one of the buy-in is certainly a huge barrier to me. That implementation cost is one of the biggest barriers because, like Jolene's saying, we're not typically profit centers, so the smaller the budget, the better for our CEOs. And coming to them with an $80,000 implementation fee that's sometimes hard to swallow.
I think once you've gotten past the point of you've got the budget, you've got the buy-in, you've got it implemented, I think the next barrier is user adoption. Maybe it's just the esteemed colleagues I've had the privilege of working with, but we all have our own ways of working. And sometimes when you bring in new technology, not everybody wants to use it in the same way. And I think for an important aspect, anytime you're bringing in new technology, is making sure that it's being used to its full potential. And I've had a couple of instances where we've brought great technology in and we've used Like we're scratching the surface of the benefit that it can bring to the department because people aren't using it consistently and in the same way. Have you had that experience, Aaron?
I have. I was actually going to ask how you overcame that. So I mean, that is definitely one of the issues. Is just the solutions are so big that you may not actually get the benefit of the whole solution, and everybody's so busy doing their thing, just doing their day-to-day jobs. It's hard for them to take time out to learn this new thing. So I would be curious, how did you overcome that, or if you did?
I would say that it's a learning process, but I will say that just before I left REI, one of the things that we were working on was knowledge management. And part of that body of work included leveraging the existing technology that we had. And what we facilitated small focus groups with everybody in the department to understand what they liked about the tech, what they didn't like about the tech, why they weren't using it the way that it was intended. And then we were able to take that into consideration when we're building out the next steps and then setting clear expectations on the go forward path. And then I think once everybody knows kind of where we've been, where we're going, making sure that everybody has training so that everybody's using the technology in the same way. And then making sure that clear expectations, right? Like performance management is an important part of managing a department or managing people. And I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration when you do roll out new technology. Because the last thing anybody wants to do is spend a lot of money bringing in tech that's there to help somebody, or help the team, help the company, help the department, and then it not being used. And then it's just a waste of money and a waste of time for everybody. And so making sure that everybody's on board with, and we've addressed the issues coming into the technology is, I personally have found very beneficial. And then they have skin in the game, right? Like they've had an opportunity to say their piece on what their hang up was.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of the AI that we're implementing, especially for us, it's not like it's a brand new work stream. It's hopefully trying to improve on the work stream that we already have. So I think for practical advice for people who are looking to implement AI is something you can do even before you get the budget is just to get your current work streams as efficient as possible and as defined as possible, so that it's easy for you to then move those into the AI. I think that kind of leads question, the two of the major topics, which is like, what are the barriers? How do you overcome those barriers? The barrier is adoption. One of the ways to overcome it is identifying the AI that actually meets your needs. And so the more defined your current workflow is, the way that for us, it's contract management. That's the biggest thing where we deal with contracts day in, day out. So getting our contract flow as defined as possible is going to help us implement a new contract management system, which is what we're in the process of doing right now.
One thing I'll throw out there from the perspective of big law. So AI has been something that the AmLaw has been chasing for probably 15 years now. And there's been a huge focus on the back end development of these technologies. So sort of the engines that fuel them have come along quite nicely, but there's been very little focus on user experience. And so what you see in the larger firms is development of these tools or implementation of these tools where you have to hire professionals to actually run them. And then there's this sort of chasm between the legal teams where the more technically inclined attorneys will get involved in the use of these tools and then the others won't. So the good news is there seems to be a turn in the direction of startups in the legal tech field that are really focused on user experience in relation to automation. So,
John, you just raised another interesting facet when you're talking about budget, making sure that you're clear on what the all-in number is, because for a lot of technologies or systems, you need a system administrator. So I think you need to know if you're going to need to hire somebody to do that, if it's going to be an existing employee, making sure that that's part of their job description or not. So I think that's another, you need to know what you're getting into that will help drive the buy-in, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's a lot of hidden costs in this stuff.
One of the things that was critically important for us when we were deciding on the technology was whether it integrated with things we had already used. So I think when you're looking at the types of AI to work with and the types of innovation to work with, the more you can kind of tie it into existing products that you're using, the easier it's going to be for your technology team. Not speaking, John, you're the expert on the information side of it, but it seems to me that it's just easier for them to get their hands around a new workflow that fits into something that they've already been working on, rather than just a whole brand new system that they're going to have to implement into your company. And John, I think you're right about law firms. It's the same in the in-house world. I think is that you're going to have technically or technologically smarter people that just want to get involved with the technology, and then you're going to have attorneys who just don't. We went to law school because we're not good at that stuff. So we don't want to be involved in it. You have to find that technology that can kind of meet both of those needs and find a way for everybody to get value out of it.
Yeah, very, very good points from both of you. So taking this sort of a little bit further, so obviously AI or just automation in general can offer some productivity boosts for legal teams. What are the tasks and processes that are best suited for automation in your worlds, and what are you seeing in regards to the gains in this space?
Yeah, I can take that. I kind of started talking about it, but for us, because we're so contract focused, it's the two sides of the contract world. It's the first side for me is just getting a handle on all of the contracts that you have. So when you come, I started at my job last year. So when you come into a new role, it's hard to get a handle on all of the things that have happened prior to your time there. And one of the best ways I think to do that for contracts is to have a contract management system. So the AI that we're implementing now is the ability to OCR all of your contracts, to pull out common terms, to be able to sort into tables that are dynamic tables so you can quickly pull out that information. That's where I see kind of the largest value for companies like ours that are very contract focused. And then the other side of the contract is the life cycle management, which is just getting new contracts through the process. And the ability to automate part of that workflow, assign out to the different parts of the business who needs to review what, keeping track of it, keeping track of all of the approvals and the signatures, all of that kind of the stuff that has to be a contract administrator now. If I can, and that was my point about having your workflow in place right now. We have somebody who does all of that work for us, right? But she has much more value than just doing that. So if I can have AI take on some of that role and give her the ability to do more substantive work, that's going to be great. So those to me are the two largest areas for growth, in my industries, both sides of the contract management.
I think anything from my perspective, anything that's workflow related, whether it's contract management, whether it is case management, matter management, anything that automates the process, and then you can pull data out for reporting and trending. I'll use the example of hotline case management, partnering with HR, whether it's calls coming in through the hotline or investigations that HR is facilitating through their employee relations function. Being able to see that data and see where issues are popping up, especially if you're in a multi-site business, and then being able to address either hot issues or provide training that's targeted to that specific, whether it's a district manager or a region, regional management, is really helpful. And then you become a department that's proactive rather than reactive. Because if you can get ahead of problems, then you're solving larger problems, litigation down the road, ideally. I think that's where I've spent most of my career in the compliance space. And that's where I've seen a big boost from AI and automation, is being able to, that way everybody is also using the same technology, putting the investigation notes in the same system, and everybody is facilitating the process the same way. And it makes for more fair and consistent practices on the administrative side, which is really helpful.
I think on the employment side, there are lots of opportunities. I'm not sure that AI has caught up fully to where it can be. The ability to, if you work in multi-state, any company that has multi-state operations, just keeping track of the changing rules and laws in cities and states it takes so much time. And there are some automated companies out there, or automation companies out there, that are helping with that, like sending automated alerts when things have changed. But I think if you can find one that fits your business, that's something that saves a lot of time for the in-house, especially the employment lawyers in-house that don't have to then chase that down. And
I think the flip side of that, though, too, is now that you have all the data, what do you do with it? Because there is such thing as data overload, right?
Yeah.
So you've got all this information coming in that's really helpful. You only have so much time in a day. So how do you take that information and make it useful for the end user? So for employment, generally, it's going to be your HR department or line leaders, pick your jurisdiction, and making sure that the information that we provide back out is usable and digestible. Because at the end of the day, at least, my line of business, my job is always to support the folks that are helping the customers at the front line in whatever way that shows up. And so what I see as a lawyer, I'm pretty sure they don't want to see as a store manager or an employee relations specialist. Pick your position. So it's my job to take that information and digest it and then turn it into something that's usable by the business.
Yeah. So I guess if you could find an AI or automation that would give you what your customers want to see, right? So you don't have to then take the data and manipulate it as much, but this is kind of what you need to be putting out into the workplace. That just saves that one step for you.
Makes sense.
Oh, sorry.
So, no, I was just going to say we have some questions coming in from the audience. So the first one's kind of pertinent to what you were both just talking about. So somebody asked if you have any tips for ensuring that you know about upfront or hidden costs when evaluating the legal tech providers.
One of the things that I always do is do reference checks. Sometimes I'm lucky enough where there's a user that's in my, close to where I'm at, and I will actually go sit with them and see how they're using the technology. Because I think if you ask any technology provider, people implement it in different ways. And so learning how they implement it, kind of what their roadblocks were, how they overcome those roadblocks, what they would like to do differently, has been really helpful. And then also asking them, not the provider, asking the client, like, what are the things that you didn't plan for that you ended up having to address either financially or operationally?
I think that another thing that has helped me is to get a diverse team of people looking at any of these solutions. So it's not just a team that's looking at it, but somebody from finance, somebody from technology, somebody from sales, all of us kind of looking at these products, because I think we all have our own, our own approach to how we review things, and the finance people will look at things differently than I do. And that was how we found some of the hidden costs, questions that I didn't think to ask.
Yeah.
My technology officer thought to ask, and then we discovered that there was a significant implementation fee or a significant fee here. And then I think it also helps because those people get an understanding of what their time commitment is going to be in terms of the hidden costs that are going to be put on members of your business. The more that they're involved, kind of, blurring all these questions together, like the more that you can get that buy-in from all members of your organization, the more hidden costs that you'll identify.
Aaron, you raised a really good point. I think it's important too, having a cross-divisional implementation team will make the process go a lot smoother. And to your point, highlight things that if it's one person doing the implementation with the vendor partner, it's probably going to fall flat rather than pulling in a cross-divisional team. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm glad somebody asked that, because I think that is the thing. We're trying to offer practical guidance, and that's one of the things that can jump up and bite you is those hidden costs. So good ways to avoid it.
Yeah, one thing I'll add in, I've seen this an infinite number of times when somebody tries to bring in some kind of productivity boost tool or automation. What they don't account for is the lack of quality of their data. And so when you start to build automations around workflows or processes, you very quickly find out that you need to go back and ensure that the data is structured properly and cleaned up, and that could be incredibly time consuming. So something to keep in mind. All right, we just had another question come in. So with so many companies offering certain popular tools like contract management, are you aware of any benchmarking or comparison resources that provide guidance on the current market and product functionalities?
There are organizations out there that do that kind of work. Sure, if you did a quick Google search, it would pop up. But there are companies out there that do that very thing, and they'll put different providers and quadrants, and sometimes they'll even have client bios where they'll, references on like what works, what doesn't work. So there are preferences out there.
I think another thing you can do is go to your other current providers that work with a broad range of companies. So, for example, if you use something like Salesforce.com, if you go and ask Salesforce.com for their thoughts on different providers or different, they've seen so many other companies that have implemented things. They could have some of that background. Now you have to obviously take it for what it's worth because they may have some vested interest in what they tell you, but they've at least had more experience. Kind of to Jolene's point, if you're not able to go and sit with somebody else who's able to use that technology so you can see it, you have to go to people who have sat down and have clients who have used that technology.
I think something else I've seen in the past, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I've seen procurement managers ask during the RFP process who they consider their biggest competitors to be.
Interesting. All right. Here's another one that's sort of pertinent. What's the biggest mistake that you think legal departments make when applying new technology like automation?
I think the biggest one is solving a problem that's not really a major problem for your department. So there's a lot of really cool technology out there that I think can make it splashy and it looks cool, but it's actually not a time loss for your department. And so if you start going down the road of implementing that or trying to implement that, it's hard to get the ROI that actually justifies that. And so that's a mistake, not just in my mind, not just for implementation of that one, but then it somewhat lowers your credibility when you come back the next time and say, you'd like to implement this other thing that actually maybe really is important. So really clearly identifying where are the roadblocks, or where are not roadblocks is probably the wrong word, but where are the slowdowns in your workflow that really, if you change those, they really would improve your efficiency or bring you some ROI that you can show. Especially if this is your first time implementing it, the first one that you implement ideally would have kind of an immediate ROI or some very readily identifiable ROI. I think a lot of times for legal departments, again, we're not technology people. I mean, I don't mean to speak for everybody, but I'm not a technology person, right? So I see cool things that I thought, I didn't realize that technology could do that, but it's not really something that actually takes me a lot of time or takes a person a lot of time. So it's hard to justify the ROI. And then you don't get the buy-in from the business anymore. And then it's hard to do the things that really do matter. So in my mind, that would be the biggest mistake.
I think another, and I've experienced this, is you bring new technology in and you get a better deal if you buy all the bells and whistles that come with it, which is, whether it's different modules or whatever it is. And then you never get to use the other modules because you don't have the buy-in of the business to do the other things that you've paid for as part of the all-in cost. We brought in a case management system and we also got 4 training modules every year. To this day, we're not using the training modules because I can't get the buy-in of the business to make certain pieces of training mandatory. So while the case management is great and it's getting better day by day, we're not leveraging other things that have been paid for. So, it's a bit of a loss, frankly.
Yep, I agree with both of those points. I think one of the things that I see is a lack of measurement in the initial stage of the implementation of the existing process. So the ROI that Aaron has been mentioning, you've got to have a starting point and understand what it is you're trying to build towards. And I've seen a lot of successful implementations with no actual ROI documented because nobody took the time to understand how long things were taking to begin with.
I think the time is another good point, John. I'd learned this early on in my career. I'm actually not doing lawyer work, but as a lawyer, come to find out you spend more time prepping for the technology implementation than you are actually implementing. So if you do the hard work up front, theoretically, the implementation and user adoption should be a lot smoother. And I think most companies, most departments, most individuals work in the inverse of that. They want to speed through the prep and then spend more time in the implementation and training and education on the backside. So if you don't do the homework up front, you're not solving the problems that you're intending to solve for in the backside.
I couldn't agree more. All right, here's a good question that just came in. How do you manage resistance from your team, particularly getting buy-in from the folks that might feel that the automation tools are a threat to their job?
It's a good question.
You want to go first? I definitely have
So many thoughts. Yeah, I think this is one where being clear up front. I mean, if you know, like if the intent of the technology is to replace somebody's position, then I think you need to be transparent. I mean, depending on what kind of leader you are, like I think honesty and transparency is always important. My guess is most legal departments, in-house departments are pretty thin. So there's always work to do. So it's bringing that person along to show them that they can actually use their time differently and in a more useful way than whether it's data entry or something else. And then let them be part of the process, because my guess is they know the workflow better than anyone else, and they know where the trigger points are.
100%, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think in a company where you have a thin legal department, which I think all of us probably have, one of the ways to show that ROI that I was mentioning earlier is that we can take this person's time and do something that's more value add. Yeah. So the biggest benefit to AI in my mind is just the redundant tasks. I think that was part of the question. These redundant tasks are the tasks that really, if you have somebody who's a high achiever or somebody who you want to make a high achiever, you want to get rid of those tasks anyway. So working with them, like Jolene said, and then having a clear identity or identifying a clear career path for that person, that you're not going to do this anymore, but now with all that time, I want you to do this other thing. And I think that hopefully that they would then buy in and want to grow their career. I don't see most AI as being like fully replacing anybody's job. So I don't think there's going to be, at least not right now. Who knows what's coming with this, ChatGPT and other of these advancements. But right now, I don't think any of the AI is going to just fully replace your contract administrator or a lawyer. It really is just going to be, you don't have to do those tasks anymore. You can focus your time on these other things.
Part of it too is, there's got to be some quality control. Just because AI has built, I'm just going to, by way of example, a litigation hold, that doesn't mean that it's accurate. So you need somebody that's going to go through and make sure that it's going to the right people and the hold is addressing the right types of documents and records. While I would like to think that AI is perfect 100% of the time, that's probably not the case. So there needs to be somebody that can have that oversight. I think going back to, bringing the person along whose job they think the AI is or the technology is taking over, ask them, like, what is it that, how do they view their time? Like, what is their value add to the department? What do they want to be doing? What do they want for their career progression? And then help them along, help them bring them along and let them drive maybe part of the process.
Yeah, I think along with getting the rest of the business to buy in early on, I think getting your team to buy in that this is a valuable tool. And I think Jolene's right. One of the ways to do that is have them identify where those parts, what parts of their job do they not really like to do that much, or that take up a lot of time that they feel like they could be doing something better with that time. And then maybe that's where you focus your efforts on finding some AI to improve that, both because you're going to get buy-in from that person, but also, again, not to keep repeating this, but it's going to be easy to show the ROI on that because that person doesn't have to do those tasks. They can do something else that's beneficial to the business.
Yeah. I think John mentioned this earlier too, identifying the workflow and doing the time assessments. How much time does it take to do a certain function? I had one of my legal specialists do that for her job. And it was actually eye-opening of how much time she spent on just data entry and administrative tasks. And she is well paid, and that's not where she wants to be spending her time, but things, come to find out, take time to do. So it was really helpful for her to see where she was spending her time, for me to see kind of where we could shift some stuff, and then also for new leaders coming in to share, like, this is how team members are spending their time on, I don't want to say non-value add because the work needs to get done, but I would say lower level work that either somebody else could be doing, technology could be doing, or maybe not doing it all.
Yep.
So we just got a question in, says, Jolene, you mentioned data overload. How can we get the most out of our data? It's kind of an open-ended question, but
I think the first thing is be clear in what what you want the data, what you want to use the data for. So for example, if you are wanting to know what type of employee relations issues are popping up in some, given jurisdiction, be clear on the data fields that are going to drive that report and how that information is going to be used. Myself, like, I love reporting. I love playing in data. Not a technology person, but I love data. But if I'm the only person that's finding the information helpful and it's not moving the business forward, then it's really not helpful at all. So I think thing one is just be clear on what you want the outcome to be, and then build back because you're gonna have to figure out what data fields you need. And again, using a cross-divisional team like Aaron suggested, being clear on, what's the information that you need to pull out, because we can get data on anything. Whether it's useful or not is going to depend on what you're using the data for.
All right, great, thank you. So the next question is there a point where an organization automates too much?
I haven't had that experience. I've been in legal departments my entire career, and I would say technology is not our strong suit. We have, like, at least the departments I've been in, we have enough to get by, but I have not been in a department where of the digital age where automation is just kind of core to who the department is and how we function.
I agree. I think as in general, again, legal departments are very small with huge tasks. I think even businesses are, obviously we've seen throughout the past few weeks, reducing the size of their workforce sometimes by tens of thousands of people. So I don't think there is right now a time where a business could automate too much. I think there's more work than there are people in the organization. And that's certainly in the legal departments. There's more work to do than there are people to do it. So as automation stands right now, I don't think you can automate too much. I think Jolene's point is right. You can't just automate. You have to have some check on that. You can't just rely on the automation to do everything for you. So maybe that was the question: is can you? That would be too much, I think, if you just said we're only going to have, we're not going to have any humans look at this contract. It's just going to be AI. They're going to determine what's the bad clauses or whatever it might be, and then we're going to send that back to our supplier or our client. That would be automating too much. So as long as you have that human check, I think there's always going to be more tasks for the lawyers and the legal team to do. So I don't think you can automate too much.
I think another facet of that is businesses move so quickly these days, and to make updates to technology takes longer to update technology than how fast the business is moving, generally speaking. So just because you have the technology, it doesn't mean it's going to move at the same pace as the business, and what you need today probably isn't going to be what you need tomorrow. And that's where I think your lawyers and your support staff, that's where a legal department is really beneficial, working with the business so that they can work in lockstep as strategies, business goals are being worked on, getting the deals done. Technology and AI can't do that.
Right.
I don't think.
Well, that's a great segue to the next question, which is how do you foster a continuous learning and development culture among your technology team?
Maybe that's for you, John.
Yeah. I've never had a technology team in my legal departments. I've worked closely with our tech folks. But again, the legal department, generally speaking, we're not a profit center. And so any support that we get, it's like because we're a business client, not because it's, the latest and greatest thing to help move the business along. That said, I think that if you're working with somebody in IT, finding the right IT partner that's interested in the legal field is really helpful. We brought in some technology a decade ago, and at the time it was new to the organization. It was kind of newer in the industry. And one of our IT folks who helped with the implementation, his dad happened to be a lawyer. And so he was super interested, and he's been our go-to guy. Anytime we've had an issue, we call him because he has taken the time to understand it and learn it on his own, not because it was something the company wanted him to do, just because he finds it really interesting. So I think that, if you don't have a tech person on your team and you're working with somebody in the IT department, finding somebody, if you can, that has that interest will help.
And not related to the technology team, but one thing that I'll share that I'm happy to let people steal is the thing I've implemented this year for my legal team meetings is every other week, I want one of my members to make a presentation on something that's interesting to them. It doesn't have to be related to work, but one of them that stands out is one of my team members spent her whole time teaching us about shortcuts on the computer, and it was like eye-opening. I did not know all of the different things that you can do, and it just speeds up how many things, how fast tasks can be switching between. I know we probably all work with 4 or 5 monitors, or so switching between monitors, switching between windows. It was really eye-opening, and I think that did, giving her that platform to talk about something that was interesting to her helped spur her along, but it also kind of opened all of our eyes about new technology that we can talk about. So the next one that we're going to talk about is that ChatGPT. I wanted everybody to go out and use it and just see what that is, and how are we going to be able, if at all, how are we going to be able to use it in the future. So I think just having that open dialogue with your team, and encouraging them to be creative and come with new things, and offer their own thoughts on how they think that's going to fit into the organization. A lot of times the people on your teams are just taking orders directly from you, kind of carrying out what the business wants to do. But if you flip that around and say, what do you think the business could do with this? How do you think this is going to be valuable? I think that creates that culture of, the curiosity culture, that people bring in things that are not all going to work. Probably 90% of them are not going to be useful, but you might get 1 or 2 that are actually kind of a cool idea, like all those shortcuts, which I know is not automation, but is like a game changer for my day.
So Aaron, you mentioned ChatGPT. Just going to pull an audible here. What are your folks thinking about that, and how do you sort of view that technology in relation to the work that you do?
Yeah, it's so at the beginning stages that it's hard to really understand where it's going to go, and it's almost like, like Ask Jeeves is not around anymore, I don't think, but Google is, right? So is ChatGPT going to be the thing that's there in a year or 2? Probably not. It's probably going to be some iteration of that. But it's like, when you see that it can just kind of pull, the first thing that came to mind was like, well, how do you do associate relation, union avoidance training? If you could just go in somewhere and say, what would be a presentation on union avoidance, and it could pull all of these, publicly available, like law firms always publishing these tips for positive associate relationships and all that. It could pull all that into a presentation. That would immediately cut down on outside counsel spend, because I wouldn't have to have somebody come in. Now, to Jolene's point earlier, is it all accurate? Can I trust all of it? So but if it got to the point where it was reliable and we could actually just use it, it really would cut down on your need for outside counsel, and maybe some of your employees, some of the work that your team is doing right now could be automated. But I think it's just so early. And one of the things that we ran into is it was down, and I'm not sure if it still is, but it's been down over the weekend, because I think so many people are hearing about it and just kind of overwhelming their servers right now. So it obviously would have to get more functional than it is right now.
Yeah, they're actually launching, OpenAI is launching a subscription service to deal with the scaling issues.
And I saw that, I think Bing or something is launching the Microsoft, which again, I don't know if anybody uses Bing, but Microsoft Bing is launching their own AI component to their search engine.
Yeah, they've done an integration with OpenAI. So they were one of the investors in OpenAI, and I think they're trying to take a larger investment stake now. They're integrating Bing, and I think their intention is to try to supplant Google in this space by using this technology.
My worst nightmare managing litigation is having training done that was inaccurate, or a document that is inaccurate that then is like exhibit number 1. Again, going back to human, there needs to be some quality control, making sure that what is being provided is accurate.
Couldn't agree more. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if we can get in a question or 2 here. So how do you measure the success of your technology initiatives, and what metrics do you use to track progress?
I think that goes back to being clear on what it is you're trying to solve for at the front end. And then working with your cross-divisional team on, what metrics do you want to use? User adoption is a clear one. If it's, contract management, if it's, we're going to have out of 100 contracts, 95 are going to be in the system with, all of these fields completed. then you can go back and look how many contracts came through the department, how many of those fields were completed. Is one example.
I think it also depends on what type of solution or what's the reason for your implementation of the solution. If this is an immediate need, there's nothing that's solving it right now, I think you can measure the success by just whether you meet that need. Are you able to accomplish that goal? I think those are somewhat rare. The more likely one is working okay right now, but it could be a lot better. And then I think that's to Jolene's point about how are you trying to make it better, and what's the buy-in? I think setting KPIs or setting some metrics is very important for recognizing the success, because it's definitely not going to be, going back to the contract management, it's not going to be like we implement it tomorrow and next month we know all of our contracts. It's not going to be that fast. So I think setting realistic expectations that by the end of the year, we will have everything in there. We'll have 95% of our contracts uploaded and ingested. And then also I think setting that timeline for that's in the past, everything going forward has to be in there. And making sure that's, I think the success of it is that from now on, nothing is going to be outside of this new system that you implemented, so that you can spend the time catching up from the past. But going forward, you don't have to ever go back again. You're doing it the right way from now on.
I would highly encourage you, when you bring on new technology to build the training materials for new folks coming into the department and be creating rules of engagement, and those get incorporated into onboarding plans. Because one of the things that we found is new folks coming into the department either weren't trained or didn't understand or got too frustrated with the technology that we had in place. So they just never used it. And I mean, I'm not now, but having to kind of go back and kind of retrain folks and bring everybody back to the same starting point is a lot more difficult than making sure it's part of their onboarding plan. And that way you're making sure it's consistent, everyone's using it consistently.
I think this will be our last question. So given the competition for limited resources, how do you overcome management resistance to investment in automating legal department processes?
That is the $1 million question. And if you have the answer, please let us know.
So I think it goes back again to, you have to identify the ones that have ROI, and you have to spend your limited time only on the ones that can have a demonstrable ROI to the business. Because I think your CEOs and your COOs, they don't want to spend time thinking about the legal department. So the more you can just very readily say, we spend $1 million a year on this. If we implement this thing for $100,000, our cost of that will go down to $500,000, right? So right away, you spend $100,000, you save $400,000 next year. That ROI is very easy to understand. And I think going back to my earlier point, if you get bogged down in the just kind of cool, nice to have, it would be interesting to have this technology, but it's harder to identify ROI. I don't think you're going to get buy-in from management. So I think that is the $1 million question. Is you have to make sure that the ones that you implement are actually things that your business needs and can provide some benefit back to it. And then that cross-functional team gets your CEO and your COO on board. Once that team meets, have that team report to your CEO. Say, we all look at this. We all think this is a great idea. This is the benefit of it. So it's not just the legal team trying to get that thing implemented.
I think that's the biggest takeaway of today's session is whatever tech you're bringing in, make sure that there's a business value add, not just a department value add, because at the end of the day, we're here to support the business. And if the tech isn't supporting the business, then it's probably going to fall flat.
Yep, absolutely.
On that note, I think we're just about out of time. Thanks so much to both of you for your insights.
Yeah, thank you. Nice
My
talking.
pleasure. Have a great day.
Great session. Thank you, John, Aaron, and Jolene. And Jolene, a great point to end the session on. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this fantastic session. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you, everyone.